So today I started looking at Kipu and Yupana. I just kind of got interested in it. I looked at it before for and I was aware of. There's a website with a lot of you know records and detailed data on all this stuff on the Kipu. Um, but yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I just got interested in the Yupana, which is the um, little square uh, wood or stone um, Inca abacus sort of things. And yeah, so I was looking for some information on how that shit works. Well, yeah, I mean, it turns out nobody knows how it works because Spaniards like killed everybody that knew how that worked, or something. Like I don't know. The knowledge was lost on how the Yupana works, and pretty much how the Kipu work too. But I kept running into these claims that the way that you calculate things. So it's basically assumed, and I am happy to go along with this assumption because it makes sense that the Yupana is involved in processing math, doing mathematical operations, and somehow that is translated both to and from the Kipu. I'm totally happy to accept that. I feel like that's probably accurate. Um, but what I kept running into was this claim that the Upana operates in a very specific, strange way that utilizes Fibonacci numbers or some bullshit like this. And basically, what happened is, I'm looking through this and I'm like, these claims don't make sense because there's two major problems. So the first one is on the Kipu, they appear to be using base 10, very much like us, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then start over. 10, 11, 12, right? So numbers like 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, these are significant in the language of the Inca, Quechua, which is strange for the Americas. Most Native American languages use a base 20 or a base 4 or a base 8. There's some base 6s in California. Like, it's base 10 is strange in the Americas. It's unusual to see that. And it's actually historically unusual even in Eurasia. I get into that, but it's not because you have 10 fingers. That's not why we use base 10. That's not why it's so common. That does play a role, but it is actually more intuitive for people to use some other number system. Like, if you're going to be counting on your fingers, it also makes sense to count on your toes, and that's how you get base 20 being really, really common. Right? Anyway. Um, yeah, so here, the Kipu are using base 10 consistently. And you can tell because, if assuming that each knot in a little section counts as 1, you never get more than 9 at a time. And then there's a space, and then you get another section. This pretty strongly indicates that we're using base 10. But if the Upana, the calculating device that is supposed to operate very, very seamlessly, very well, very efficiently with the Kipu that is operating base 10, if the Upana operates on some other weird, like Fibonacci-based number system, you are now introducing a complexity that makes absolutely no fucking sense. Right? So, like, if this slot represents 1, and the next one next to it represents 2s, and then 3s, and then 5s, and then 8s, and then 13s, how the do you translate that over to a Kipu? Which is using also it's using a positional notation, but it's a positional notation representing powers of 10. If you have positional notation on the Kipu with each of your little slots, why wouldn't you also use base 10? I feel like you would. You would use base 10 because that just makes it easier to translate from one to the other. You can just read off the Kipu directly. Oh, 743, 743. Done. It's not, what is 743 as a Fibonacci number? Who fucking knows that? If you can do that in your head, you don't need the calculator. There's another problem too, because this Fibonacci thing, it's based on rectangular grids, right? So there's no, it's just, rows and columns, and that's it. And each slot has, it's like graph paper, and each slot has a number in it. The problem is that's not what a yupana looks like. No yupana looks like this. So, apart from the fact that in order to be using the Fibonacci thing, we've added complexity for no reason. We have this problem that the way that the thing that you're doing the Fibonacci counting on doesn't look like a yupana at all. And I'll get into a second. Like, there's a very consistent structure on all of the yupana. There are differences between them, but there are things that, based on all of the ones that I've been able to find an image of, all of the original ones. So, like, people make their own, and they fuck shit up because they don't know what they're doing. But all of the original ones, all of the artifacts, they share some very, very interesting characteristics. All of them. But none of them are a rectangular grid. Not a single one of them is a rectangular grid. I feel like that's important. So, I poked around a little bit, and I found this this document from 1615, produced by a Spaniard working with the Inca, that he sent over to the king, and whatever, it got lost for a while. But, so 1615, remember that. 1615 was when this was finished and sent off. It has two of the pages, and they're just a few pages apart from each other. I think one is folio 358, and the other is 360. 360 is the one that's going to be important in a second. But both of these show a figure, and an indigenous figure holding a quipu. So this is the string with the knots on it, that thing, the quipu. But on 360, on that one, down in the bottom corner, there's a rectangular grid. 4 across, 5 tall, and in each row, it's the one on the far edge has 5 circles, then the next one has 3 circles, then 2 circles, and 1 circle. And I think this is where the rectangular grid, and the sense that it's based on Fibonacci numbers, comes from. And as far as I can tell, what happened was, in 1931, some dude with a German name, I don't know where he's from, I don't care, but Wassen, I'm probably saying that wrong, Wassen, Henry, I think, in 1931, this dude proposed that, that little rectangle down in the bottom, that's a representation of a yupana. The text doesn't say anything about this. All the text says on this page is that the dude holding the quipu is an accountant for the territory, whatever. Incan society was very, very structured. I don't know the details of it. I need to look into that, because I think it's actually going to come in relevant to something else that I'm going to point out in a second. But at this point, I don't understand what the hell is happening. But this dude is like, he's some, important dude doing. He's the accountant and the treasurer for this region, for this maybe a city or whatever it is. I don't know. That's all it says. That's all it says. It doesn't say, and it says that he's holding a quipu. It names that, but it doesn't talk about this rectangle, this grid, with the dots in it. It doesn't talk about that at all. So the fact that this dude in 1931 comes along and says, "Oh, it's a yupana," well, one, that's pure speculation because it doesn't say that. Two, when you actually look at it, it can't be because it's not. It just isn't. I have a suspicion about what it actually is. And this is also pure speculation. But I would like at this point to point out that what happened after 1931 is people were like, "Oh, that's how yupanas work." And it was further detailed in 1979 by some, I think, Mexican, Spanish-speaking dude. In 1979, and it became kind of big. And that's where you get the sense that, and this is still like a popular, like, oh, the Inca, they used Fibonacci numbers to do math. It's a misinterpretation. I am basically 100% sure that it's a misinterpretation. I'm not sure what is misinterpretation of, because, I don't know how a yupana works. I'm just going to, I don't. I have some ideas. But honestly, I've only been thinking about this for like 5 hours now, so what the fuck do I know? But pretty damn sure that what has been accepted for the last 90 years is bullshit. So, yeah. I think what is happening here somebody, maybe the dude who wrote this book thing, I don't know. Somebody approached an Inca, possibly one of these treasurers, but somebody who had some familiarity with the system. I would hope. Approached them and asked them how it works. Now, whenever you're dealing with somebody who speaks a completely different language from you, and is using a completely different set of like mathematics and they have this whole system with all of these, this is formalized in a completely unfamiliar way to you. It would be ludicrous to assume that they're going to tell you the final story, how it all works right away, because they can't. It's not possible, right? You know. How does this mouse work? That's impossible to tell you right away. Right? You're just some rando, How does a mouse work? Oh, that's complicated. There's things in that's going to take you a very long time to understand. And a very long time of communicating is not what happened with this document. Well, about this subject, at least. This document is strange. If you look through it, there's just like a picture about Noah's flood, and it's talking about how to govern the Inca and all of this bullshit. So it's clearly not a priority for whoever wrote this, the dude that wrote this, and assuming he had other people in his employ working on this, bringing information in. It wasn't their priority to document the native culture. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is finding basic ways to communicate and deal with them. That's what they're doing. So, what I assume is they asked somebody who was at least vaguely familiar, hopefully expertly familiar, with Quipu and Yupana. Maybe just Quipu. Maybe not even Yupana at all. And they asked them how this works. and starting at a very fundamental level, and really never getting beyond that because, yeah, we only went to the first day of school and we ditched after that because priorities. We got the king. We're trying to, we're making slaves of these bitches. We don't care. We just want a surface level understanding, and that's it. Okay. So what that first day, what that surface level is going to look like is they're going to teach you how the fuck to count. Because basically, as far as this system is concerned, you're a child. You don't know shit. We can't start, at the end. We can't be like, yeah, so this is, like, it's just too much information. Even if they tell you that, you're not going to remember it. And clearly these people are smart. Like, the Incan Empire it had faults for fucking sure, but it's pretty goddamn amazing in a lot of respects. These were smart ass people. Right? They're probably used to explaining, like, starting off at a very low level, explaining this so that they can teach people, so that they can bring more people in and be accountants. Because this is a tradition that they've had for thousands of years at this point. It's much older than the Incan Empire. The Quipu and the Yupana are older than the Incan Empire by a lot. So there's going to be a pedagogy for how you talk about this, how you introduce it to somebody. And basically, I think all we're seeing in this Spanish text is day one of that education. And I think what happens on day one of that education is they teach you how the fuck to count and add. And weirdly, that ends up giving you an approximation of the Fibonacci sequence. Because, hey, we're going to start off counting. Here's a seed. Here's another seed. So now we've seen two groups, right? We've seen a 1 and a 2. How do we add those together? Oh, we get 3. Okay. So now take that and add it to our last group, and now you get 5. Hey, look at that. So now we've practiced counting and adding with seeds, and this is our basic. We're going to grow from this, but that's where the lesson ended. I think that's all this is. I think that's all that this little grid represents. And I could absolutely be 100% be wrong. But it makes a way more sense than claiming that this is a yupana, because it's not. It can't be. It can't be. It's the wrong shape, and the way that the counting works does not make sense. Now, so the yupana, and they all have a similar structure. And I don't understand what it's all for. I have some guesses, but very preliminary. Because, as I said, I've been looking at this for 5 hours. That's it. That's it. Today. I have 5 hours today. That's all. I mean, 10 years ago I looked at this, but I didn't know what the hell I was looking at then either, so. Okay. All of the pictures of actual artifacts, actual yupana, they show something very interesting. So there's these little unit squares. On some of them it's round, I saw a clay one where it looks like somebody just used their finger. So those ones are circles, but they're very, they're like a 1x1 sort of shape. And there's two sides. There's always two sides to a yupana. And it's symmetrical in some way. Some of them have a bilateral symmetry. Most of them, it's more like a rotational, like 180 degree rotational symmetry. The vast majority of them are that way. In the center, there's a large region, and like all of these little spots, they're dished, like right. So presumably they would hold some counting object, grains of sand, seeds is probably a pretty good bet. So they would hold, there's these little dishes, they would hold these. My first guess is that big central region that all of them except for one that I saw have. That's kind of just for storing, you know, a bunch of seeds that you can draw from. And then I think what's happening with the two sides, the fact that there's a symmetry there. There's two. I think what's happening there is that's for dealing with two numbers and like adding one to the other or subtracting one from the other or something. And I think that's all that these were for. I don't think they dealt with multiplication. I don't think they did anything other than just adding and subtracting. Because basic accounting, that's what you're doing. You're adding and subtracting. You don't need to be multiplying. If you're going to subtract the same thing 4 times, you can just subtract it 4 times. Same with, so that's a division. Or, you know, or multiplication, depending on which direction you're looking at it, depending how you think about it. Yeah, so I really think that the yupana is only for adding and subtracting. And the two sides are for two initial numbers, and then one gets added to the other, or one gets subtracted from the other. And that's all it is. I really think that's all it is. But, so there's always these raised sections. And the structure of the raised sections varies, and I have a suspicion about why that is. But there's always a raised section. And these little square things, there's always 7 of them. There's always exactly 7 of them, and they're always in a line. They're always connected together in a line. But also, there's always 2 of them attached to this raised section. And I've only seen one that is not chiral. That's not symmetric about that. Like usually they're either right-handed or left-handed. And what I mean by that is, so like a lot of the times, these 7 kind of spiral around. So you have your raised section and the other raised section, the analogous opposite one, and these 7 will kind of wrap between them on both sides, and then you'll have your big center region. Only on one of them have I seen it with 2 on both, attached to both. Right? So there would be 3 arching between them. Normally, what it is you have 2, there's 1, and then 1, and then you have the other 5, and only 1 is touching that other side. So this is clearly attached to this guy because there's a pair of them set up on this, and you have the mirror image on the other side. This guy has 2, and then the other 5 wrap around, and then you have the big central region, which is usually split into 3 parts. I have no idea why that is, but very consistently it's split into 3 parts. And then there's one that I saw where it is bilateral, right? So the sides are mirror images of each other instead of coiling around. It's not like this, it's like this. So you've got your raised sections at one end, and then you've got the like central region, what I assume is the analog to that big central region, down at the bottom, because it's shared on both halves, right? It's the only one that's not cut down there isn't a wall through it down the middle. It's open. So I assume that would be kind of your storage for all of your seeds that you pull from to build up your numbers so that you can do your adding and subtracting. You still have 7, but the first 5 coming up from that one end, they're just kind of like randomly, what's next to them doesn't seem to have any effect on, doesn't seem to have any relationship. But then those last 2 are again connected to the raised areas. And that's why I think that the 2 attached is actually indicating what that row is, which of these pedestals it's attached to on the ones that are spiral. Because it could go the other way, right? The two that right that could actually indicate the end of it, and it's actually attached to the other side. But the fact that we've got this one that's bilateral and the two are clearly attached, I think that kind of makes the case that this is how it works across the board. And we have this one, that clay one, where everything is round. It's all, it looks like it just, dude stuck his thumb in to make all of these little spots. That's the only one I've seen that's not handed in this way. So, so the seven, they pair off on both sides. And I think this is actually an intentional thing. It's so that it doesn't matter what your preference is, right or left, you can use this one very nicely. So we've got the big central region, which is consistently there. And there's always two other regions. Sometimes I saw one where they're off next to the pedestal things, but almost always they're in the center area. I don't know what those are for at all. I mean, fundamentally, I don't know what any of these things are for. I'm just noting the structure of these guys. But there's always these two kind of mid-sized, right? They're usually not as big as the central area, but they're bigger than the seven little divot dudes. And then on your raised pedestals, there's a lot of variety in how these are structured. I have a suspicion as to why. But basically, there can just be like one big space, or it can be cut in half, or it can be cut in half and then one of the halves is cut in half again, so you get two squares, or it can be cut into four, or you can get tiers, like further tiers that get smaller and smaller coming up. And so basically, you can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 is the most I've seen, but maybe, I don't know. There might be ones with more than that. Sections. My guess is this is actually where the thing starts, and it grows like as you're putting a number in. So for the moment, I'm going to ignore those two sort of auxiliary middle sections, those middle ones. I have absolutely no hypothesis as to what that is at this point. I'm just going to ignore them. I'm sure they're important because they're on every single one of them in some way or other. They've got to be important, but I don't know what they're for. And like I said, I don't know what any of it's for. This is all a guess. But so looking at actual quipu, so yeah, the assumption is that the yupana is designed to work with a quipu, right? So the information encoded on a quipu can be read onto a yupana and vice versa very, very quickly, very efficiently, very easily. So any numbers that the yupana is representing should be in base 10. And if you have any header information, so that is, and we know that quipu do this, so you've got some, there seems to be, like, on a quipu, there seems to be, like, groupings. And usually there'll be, maybe like 3 or 4 strands. And one of them will have 3 digits. And then the others will have 1 or, not as many digits. It seems to be a really common structure on quipu. So my guess is that header information tells you something. It's telling you what the good is. Is this, are we talking about llama? Are we talking about ears of corn? What the hell are we talking about here? Right? Some sacks of silver? What is it that we're talking about? I feel like that's what this is. Or where it's from, or something like that. It's some kind of information about the number. And I feel like the tiering system is actually important to this, because we know that the Incan Empire was very hierarchical, right? There was the empire, and then there were, there was like provinces or something, and then there were cities, and so there was structure. So I suspect, possibly, what these raised things that have variety are doing is they're communicating, or they're storing that information, like maybe where it's from. And the reason that you would have yupana of different structures is you would have accountants or treasurers, or you know, controlling or managing different tiers. So if you only have the city level, well, you only need the one. But if you're running like a province that has 10 cities, well, you're going to need two, because you have to identify your province and your city. And if you're running, at like the empire level, well, you're going to need like maybe six or whatever little things to indicate, okay, so this is from that province, that, I think that's probably more or less what these are. And it's a header. So you get the fact that the number tails off of that consistently on every single yupana tells me that this is actually the start, right? That pedestal is the start. And it's containing information about who, what, some information like this. And then the little 7, that's where your number goes. And if it's base 10, we can handle values out to 10 million. Right? Well, 10 million minus 1. That seems like... I don't know why you would settle on that as a standard. But it seems like it would probably be sufficient for most things, because the Kipu tend to indicate only up to 1,000 or so, the thousands, usually. Yeah, so you can add together 100 Kipu and track that number, and still have, 1 or 2 digits left over of wiggle space. So this, you can manage a very large region this way. And I suspect that's what's happening. Also, yes, so there's another little detail about this. So if you have, so usually, consistently, not all of them, because there's that clay one where it was like everything's circles, but every other one than that I've seen, all of the little trays, they're square. They're square. And they're small. They're like the size of your finger. They're small and they're square. And I noted earlier that base 10 is unusual in the Americas, but it does have a feature that is really convenient for this. So if you are doing your accounting with little seeds in little square trays, the last digit that you need to represent, 9, is a perfect square. And it's really easy to read. When you fill up that tray, 3 by 3, that's really easy to read. It's really easy to know it's full and that you need to go to the next one. I feel like that's not an accident. Base 20 would be more difficult. You would have to set up a specific rectangle. Square is much easier to just kind of eyeball. And yep, there. You don't have to teach somebody nearly as much in order to manufacture a yupana if you're using a base 10. You don't have to teach them as much to understand how to read the number, because you can instantly see, oh, it's full. Oh, there's a spot missing. Oh, there's 3 spots missing. You can very, very quickly see that. You can inside of a few days, you're going to be good at reading those numbers. I feel like that's intentional. I feel like there's actually a very strong chance that Quechua has a base 10 number system because it evolved after this was developed. this way of handling numbers might have been developed first, and then they came around to base 10 as their way of talking about numbers. Because it has this really nice feature that you can make these little square things, throw some seeds in there, and you can tell, oh, there's 9. Oh, there's 7. Because if there's 10, one's sitting on top. It's not flat. And then you know, oh, we got 10. Well, we'll just put that one over there and then clear this. Like, your accounting becomes ludicrously easy. The process becomes extraordinarily simple. Which is probably how it would have worked. Because these are smart people. They know they know what they're doing. In a complicated way of dealing with math, you're gonna make mistakes. This is not, we know from the way that it is talked about by people observing it, that they were extremely fast, they were extremely accurate. So it was not some really complicated way. It was not, you're not dealing with some number-based change between the yupana and the quipu. They're both base 10. All of the information on the quipu has to be transferable to the yupana. So that header information has to transfer. We have to be able to use that somehow. And I think really all we're doing is we're adding and subtracting, and that's it. And that's it. I don't know. But yeah, no, I got a little bit mad at yeah, so I was watching, I started this adventure off watching some YouTube videos, like people proclaiming this is how you do it, and I'm like, okay, no. The shit that you're doing is absolutely ludicrous. It doesn't make sense, even just as a way to do math anyway. Also, you're not using the right structure. So there was this one I saw where they were working with a grid that looked kind of like a yupana, but it didn't have 7, it had 6. And so I think what happened is somebody drew it wrong, and then somebody came along later and looked at that wrong drawing, and it was like, oh, because the way that they were doing this math is, like, each of the little blocks represented 1, and then the middle-sized blocks represented 2, and then the large block represented 3, and then another block represented 6, and another block represented 12. So the fact that there were 6 of these, I think, played into. But there isn't 6 on a yupana, there's 7. So they drew it wrong. And then they drew wrong conclusions from the wrong drawing. Also, they're doing this 1, 2, 3, 6, 12 thing, which is different from the really popular Fibonacci sort of number sequence that is normally talked about. So they're definitely just making shit up. And then this other one, he was, I don't know what the fuck he was doing, because he didn't talk during it. He didn't explain anything that he was doing. But he was using grids that were like 5 by 8, and he had 4 of these grids, and they're all rectangular grids, and he's just moving seeds between them, and I don't know what the fuck he's doing. He's like, yeah, this is yupana math. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? A yupana is not a rectangular grid. So automatically it's bullshit. And he was trying to do some weird multiplication of some big numbers. Like, We have no evidence that that multiplication was ever used on yupana, was ever performed on it. Because if all you're doing is accounting, particularly reading to and from kipu, really all you're ever going to need to do is add and subtract. Right? You're going to have, okay, so how many sacks of corn do you need this year for your village? Okay, so we're going to subtract from our store, and we're going to indicate that we gave it to this village. That's a subtraction. Or okay, for taxes, how much corn are you paying us? You know, that's an addition. That's all you're going to be doing. That's what accounting is. It's addition and subtraction. And it's still, even modern accounting, overwhelmingly, it's addition and subtraction. Multiplications end up happening, right? Because, oh, we bought 17 vans. Well, okay, so you take the price of one van and you multiply it by 17, I guess. But you really just added or subtracted the cost of 17 vans. We don't need to be doing multiplication on this. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, we don't need to do multiplication to do accounting. And honestly, it's faster and easier to teach, and, you know, we can spread it much faster if all we're doing is addition and subtraction. And that makes it more practical, that makes it more powerful, and I think that's probably what they did. I mean, I'm sure you had individuals who understood how to multiply and divide. And they might have had methods where they like drew it in the sand or they used some sort of device for it, but I don't think that the yupana was that device, because I think ultimately what it is you take a kipu and another kipu, you indicate them, their current state, and then you either subtract or you add one to the other. And we need to keep track of, on our yupana, we need to keep track of which is which. So we need the indicator. We need the raised up information, the raised up little platforms, telling us which kipu is which number is which kipu. We need that. That's part of it. It's right? So George and Bob. Okay. Well, Bob is subservient to George, a lower level. So he's buying 14 llamas, and he's for 400 sacks of corn. Okay. I think that's how it worked. Anyway. All speculation, so fuck it. But yeah, no, anybody who's out there like, yeah, this is how it works, no, you're full of shit. Yeah, you're full of shit. You're a fucking charlatan. You don't know how it works. Nobody knows how it works. And if you're going on, like, these researchers from 1931 and 1979, they were clearly wrong. Because that little grid on page 360 of the fucking whatever it's called, from 1615, is not a yupana. It does not claim that it's a yupana in the text. It doesn't. It does not claim that. This dude from 1931, he looked at it and he was like, oh, maybe that's a yupana. It isn't, so he was wrong. It isn't. It can't be. So if you're going around saying, this is how you do math on yupana, no, you're a fucking liar. You're a charlatan. Stop. Fuck you.